So here's the thing I was thinking about today, and that is that everybody's house, as different as they are, and I've been to almost everybody's house here, and so I've been working my way around, visiting everybody, so I've noticed everybody's house, despite how different they are. Some of your houses are real nice and inviting and warm, and I can just feel like I'm at home when I walk in. Some of your houses are like freaky, scary, something out of a Tim Burton movie, and I just am like counting down the minutes to leave, hoping that I don't have to call my wife to say, "Get me out of here, 911." Some houses are freaky, but nevertheless, despite all the differences, what is the same in every house, every family, every culture is that every house has rules. You all grew up with rules. And so I tried to get a collection of people's rules that they had when they were growing up. I went on Facebook and a few other media sites. I'm just like, what rules did you have in your house when you were growing up? And I got a whole bunch of stuff. Stuff from like don't run with scissors, all the way to look both ways before crossing the street, to no hitting, to don't paint your brother with peanut butter. That's my house. And so, all bunch of different things. And so I just was like, what? And I asked my wife, what rules did you have when you were growing up? And my wife sat there and she scratched her head. She goes, I don't know. I can't think of any. I'm like, you mean you had no rules? And I know your mom and dad. I've known them for like 20 years. You had rules. Okay. I know your parents. I know my in-laws. You had rules. And she goes, I just can't think of any. Well, lo and behold, on Facebook, her sister replied. So there's my sister-in-law replied, and on the reply on Facebook, it said, she wrote on there, no rollerblading in the kitchen and no shooting BB guns in the house. Okay, and so rules like that scare me. Because you don't make rules for hypothetical situations. Okay? That's just the reality of that. I read it out loud. I said, oh, Deb posted something. Your sister, she's like, what to say? And I said, no rollerblading in the kitchen and no BB guns in the house. She goes, oh, yeah, rules like that, but we never paid attention to those. Suddenly, my kids' behavior makes total sense. Okay. And I started laughing. I'm like, what? She goes, well, obviously we didn't do that. I said, no, that's not what you said. What you said was we don't pay attention to rules like that. What that means is I got this vision in my head of you flying through the kitchen on your rollerblade, popping people with a BB gun. And she just bought our kids BB guns last week. Seriously, Sam's Club on Washington was going out of business, and they had stuff 25, 50% off. They had 2 BB guns, so my wife bought them for our kids, so we have a new rule, hypothetically speaking. In case it ever happens, no BB guns in the house. But we all have these rules, whatever they are. Well, here's the thing we're going to find out, is that sometimes these rules are written down, and people have like a code of conduct that they stick up at their office or at school, in the classroom, or in their house rules are, whatever the case may be. Sometimes the rules are unspoken. In other words, they're just assumed you know. And you don't know it's a rule until you break it. And then you find out that it's a rule because you get yelled at and you get chastised for it. And people go, don't do that here. You might do that at your house, but not here. You're born in a barn. Okay, and so there's these rules that suddenly come up when we least expect it. And so this is the situation Jesus finds himself in. Okay, because the Bible is filled with rules. I mean, filled to the brim with rules and laws and all these things. And so the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the scribes, all the religious leaders, the Saracens, most people don't know about them. There's more than 2. It's not just Republican, Democrat. There's more. Okay, and so the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and everybody else, okay, they all added to it. They had their own rules in addition to the Bible because the Bible didn't have enough. In their eyes, okay? So they added to it. And so Jesus shows up for dinner, and he breaks some of their rules, and they lay into them. So this is a really interesting situation. So here's what happens. Here comes the accusation. Okay, they're at dinner, they're going to eat, and here's what happens. So Matthew chapter 15, we're going verse by verse, chapter by chapter through the book of Matthew, and this is where we're at now. 15, new chapter, verse 1 says this: Then some Pharisees and teachers of the law law came to Jesus from Jerusalem and asked. Now, this is interesting, okay, because Jesus is in Galilee. They came there from Jerusalem, which means they're so offended by Jesus and his people breaking this one little Tabor Manor eating rule that they traveled to tell him. They didn't, I know cell service wasn't good over in that area of town. I get that. And I get that Jesus isn't always on the Twitter feed, so I get that too. I understand that they weren't in regular communicado with them. But nevertheless, you would think that if somebody's doing something stupid in one state and you don't really know about it, you wouldn't get in your car just to go find out and tell them. It just seems a little extreme. But that's what they did. So they traveled to Jerusalem. They asked, Jesus, Jesus, why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders, not the law according to the scriptures? Okay, so they aren't sinning. It's not like they're going around killing people or committing idolatry or committing adultery or anything else, okay? It's not like they're doing something sinful, okay? But they're like, you're breaking tradition of the elders. They don't wash their hands before they eat. Now, how many of you have had this rule in your house? Wash your hands before going to the table. Wash your hands. Now, look at that, look at that. Okay, if your parents had that rule, you got a proof text now. Jesus said, I don't have to. Okay. Jesus said, I don't have to. You may want me to, but I don't have to. Okay, but we got the proof text. Of course, keep in mind, they didn't have sanitary water back then. It's not like they had great agriculture, not like they had great irrigation systems, not like they had great plumbing. It's not like they had all that cool stuff. In fact, when I was in India, which is near that area, not too far away, it's closer than it is from Indiana. Okay, so when I was in India, we had to shower with a cloth over our face. Okay, because if you got water in your eyes, you could get dengue belly, and dengue belly will kill you. Okay, so just think of it that you could die by shower. That's a great thing to have in your epitaph. Okay, here lies a man because of a shower. He just had to get rid of that body odor. And that's one of the reasons why so many people smell in so many countries, because the water is worse than your body odor. Okay, so sometimes washing your hands really does not make it cleaner. So just got to keep that in mind. Nevertheless, okay, so they're like, they don't wash their hands before they eat. That was that big old law. And so it's just interesting. Nowhere in the Bible does it says, thou must washest thine hands. It's not there. You can't find it. In the Old Testament, there are 613 commandments and laws. Okay? Let your brain wrap around that. There are 613. You think if washing your hands would have been a law, God would have included, because he certainly included everything else. Okay, so there's 613 laws. That is more laws in the Old Testament than there are Smurfs. Okay, because there's only 105 Smurfs. Okay, 613. There are more laws than there are bones in your body. There's 206 of those. 270 if you're an infant, but they fuse together when you get older. You get 206. Okay, and yes, that's all of them right there. Isn't that exciting? Okay, and named for you. There you go. An anatomy quiz, ready to go. Thank you, Pastor. Okay, there's 600. There are more laws in the Old Testament than there are and there are calories in the Big Mac. That's how many laws there are in the Old Testament. It is absolutely crazy how many laws there are. And the Pharisees are like, we need more. We need more. They're like chia pets. We got to have more. Okay, and they're just going nuts with that. They just got to have more chias because they don't have any friends, but they got chias and they're good to go. Okay, so they're just gotta have more laws. We need to have 614, 15, 16, 720, 890. Woohoo! We broke the Shamrock Shake. We got 1,000 more than the calories of a Shamrock Shake. Yeah, there's 980 calories, one Shamrock Shake. Okay. See, Shamrock Shakes are coming up soon. I'm about to blow my diet. I do Shamrock Shakes every day. This is what it's going to be like, okay? So, it's just crazy how many laws there are. Okay, but nothing says thou must wash thine hands. The closest it comes to is Exodus chapter 30, where it says that the religious leaders, the priests, if you will, okay, the priests must do ritual cleansing before doing bring sacrifices, but nothing about washing your hands. And here's how the Pharisees forced hand washing, because it's not like you would think. You would think you'd go up to a sink, go do a little bit of soap, kind of do this, and take a towel, and then you're done, right? Isn't that about what it would be like? Yeah, not for them. They're like medical professionals, okay? Your fingers have to be pointing to the heavens as you wash your hands, so that as they get wet, all the impurities will run down your arm and drip off the elbow. Because if you went this way, the impurities would go this way. Then even after washing your hands, they would still be defiled and impure, and you still couldn't eat your food. Okay, so you had to sit there and dip them in the water, and just kind of hold it. 'Cause they didn't have soap. Not like that. I mean, just think of it, it's not like you can go, that's not how it worked. They didn't even have utensils really back then. Okay, utensils were only used in sacrificial ritual services in the temple or by the kings. Okay, you didn't get utensils like forks and knives into public common use until like the 1200s AD. Okay, and that's during the Byzantine Empire, when the princess of the Byzantines, the Byzantine princess ate with one fork for one bite, and everybody freaked out because she offended God in their mind, because they had a rule, don't use forks for eating, because God gave you 5 on each hand. I kid you not. Okay, so they didn't use utensils, so everything was finger food. Okay, but so they're like, you gotta be just right. Okay, just right like that. And so here is how this is happening. Here's what's taking place. I want you to visualize this scene with me, okay? Check this out, check this out. So they're all at the table, and there's food, and there's Jesus, God in the flesh, right there, divine as can be, human as can be, right there, and he begins to reach his hands across the table, and the Pharisees are looking, and they get that glare in their eyes as he hadn't washed his hands yet, and he reaches for, let's say, mashed potatoes. Okay, and he reaches and he puts his hands approaching the taters. His hands go into the taters. He gets himself some taters, puts the taters up on a plate, and then it reaches up to his divine lips. He goes, ooh, gotta have me some taters. This is why I made potatoes, because I knew I'd be here someday eating taters. Gotta have me some taters. Taters. And the Pharisees are flipping out. Oh my goodness, he just reached. He didn't even want, he just, oh no, he's doing it. Jesus is a double dipper. He's going again. This is the scene. It's absolutely crazy. Jesus just wants to eat, and they're all going, how could you eat like that? You're just crazy barbarian. How could this possibly happen? And so Jesus is going to use this great moment where they're complaining about Jesus and his disciples eating, and he's going to use this moment to be able to correct them, to teach them, to rebuke them, to help them potentially grow, or at least maybe see how nuts they've become. That's kind of Jesus' point when he gets there. He just kind of goes, I've tried teaching you truth. You don't like it, so I'm just going to show you how nuts you are. I'm just going to lay stuff on the line to show you that you're crazy. You make the most crazy person look normal, and hopefully then you'll realize how far down you've stooped, and maybe you'll start figuring things out. And he wants to really take this moment to teach everybody else, including us who get to read about this historical event. Thousands of years later, we get to learn a great message about inner and outward defilement, about purity inside and purity outside. So we get a great moment here to learn together about some of this, and some of what Jesus is going to teach, as well as laugh at what happens between Jesus and the leaders and the disciples and the leaders, because this sounds like it happened yesterday in American society. It sounds like we could look up an episode out of New York Times and see this happening, because it just sounds like our culture here. It's so bizarre. So check this out as we continue on here. So we got the accusation. So they accuse Jesus. Why don't you wash your hands before you eat? And so Jesus is now going to reply like a rabbi, like a religious leader, because religious leaders do not answer your question. They respond to your question with the question. Okay, that's what they do. So if you were to say, why didn't you come home last night? Did you want me home last night? You see, so that that would be how that would work. Okay, so Jesus is going to respond to their accusation, respond to their question with the question in verse 3. So Jesus will reply, and why do you break the command of God for the sake of your tradition? Ooh. You say you got this tradition. Well, why do you sin in order to keep this tradition? Ooh, them's fighting words. Check this out. You might be going, what sin? Jesus continues, for God said, honor your mother and father. Well, my mom and dad said, wash your hands. So this is weird, right? Doesn't seem like it's a good fit. And anyone who curses their father or mother is to be put to death. Uh-oh. So Jesus is charging them with something really big. What could this possibly be? Oh, and it continues, but you say that if anyone declares that what might have been used to help their father or mother is devoted to God, they are not to honor their mother and father with it. Thus you nullify the word of God for the sake of your tradition. You hypocrites! Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human rules. Now you might have to wonder, what on earth is this all about? What is Jesus' accusation here? Well, his accusation is actually something really, really fascinating. Now this is something that ties all the way back to a couple verses in Scripture, like Numbers chapter 30, verses 3 through 5, Deuteronomy 23, verses 21 and 22, and the like. And here's what this whole issue is about. So they got money, okay? Because usually you work and you get paid for it. That's how that's supposed to go, right? And so your job has an element to it that stinks. That's why they have to pay you to do it, because they know you won't do it for free. Okay, if it doesn't stink and it's totally fun, you would probably pay to do it. That's why you pay to go to amusement parks. Okay, and so they got their money. They work and they got their money, but they want their money to themselves. So sometimes their mom or dad or both would say, "Hey, we're hitting hard times. We got some medical bills. We bought something on Amazon, or we went to eBay and we hit a bid, and the bidding got out of control and we did something really stupid. And next thing you know, we paid like 8 times the value of something, but we're in debt. We can't afford it. Can you help us out? Can you help us in our stupidity? Can you help us pay some bills? Can you help us buy food? Whatever the situation is, your dad's not getting welfare, and just because they didn't have welfare back then. Okay, so it's just can you help us with food? And then what the religious leaders were doing is saying, we can't help you, because we've taken all our money and we've devoted it to God. We have given it as a giant offering to God. That's Numbers chapter 30 and Deuteronomy 23. That somebody could, if they choose, to give all of their money and then give it to God. Now, how this tends to work is you do that as an inheritance on your deathbed. See, that's how it's supposed to work. That when I die, the temple gets my money. Okay, so they can use it to repair the brick that's breaking. They can use it to spread the message more. They can use it to get some oils for their scrolls to make sure they aren't cracking and eroding. They could use it to buy more animals for sacrifice to give to the poor. They could use it to try just to help widows have food and a place to live and all this stuff. Okay, so that's what it's supposed to be for. So what the religious leaders are doing is they're saying, I have done that. I have taken up that decree to give all the money to the church. So, Mom, Dad, I got nothing for you, so I'll go into the church, and that's where it's at. Okay, however, they haven't died yet, so they still get to use the money for themselves. You see how they're dissing Mom and Dad now? Okay, so they're sitting here saying, hey, you got to wash your hands. And Jesus is like, what good is your hands trying to be clean physically when morally they are the opposite of clean? When morally their hands are dirty. What good does it do to put soap? Doesn't remove immorality. Soap doesn't remove that type of impurity. Soap doesn't fix that type of sin and corruption and detestable behavior. So that's where Isaiah is kind of like saying, hey, this generation, these are people where God looks upon their singing and says, I reject it. God looks upon the offering that they're giving in the plate that's being passed around, and he says, I reject every penny, because you do all these things with your hands that are nice, good little behaviors to do, but in the end, your heart is twisted. Your mind's not in the right place. You're not worshiping me. You're trying to just do physical outward things, thinking that's good enough, and I reject it all because I want you. I want your heart. I want your life. I don't want just this simple behavioral showmanship. I want all of you. And so God rejects the offering. And so that's kind of what Jesus is getting at. He's like, leaders, your hand washing is rejected by God. Your whole thing is rejected because you're dishonoring God. And what's ironic is you're dishonoring your parents and you're dishonoring God by trying to obey a command in the Bible. How weird is that? They're following a passage of Scripture and dishonoring God and how they're doing it. But of course, churches today don't screw that up. Christians today don't try to support things in the Bible and then dishonor God in so doing, because they miss what the heart is. They miss what's going on there. And so Jesus continues. He doesn't just stop there. He absolutely continues. So check this out. He talks about inner defilement versus outward piety. Okay, talking about how you can be completely disgusting on the inside, but on the outside look all pretty. It's kind of like how parents used to say, when they try to tell their kids, even though their kids are ugly, that they're so pretty because they say it's on the inside is what counts. Okay, it's kind of like that, but in this case, it's a spiritual reality. Okay, in this case, it's spiritual reality. So check this out. So Jesus called the crowd to him and said, he's like, hey, everybody, come on, come in here. Put down your cell phones just for a moment. Hit pause on Minecraft. Hit pause on everything you got. Come here, gather in. So the crowd start kind of coming in. And then he says, listen and understand. Okay, our kids, if anybody has kids, they know the difference. We say, listen to me. And they're like, I am listening to you. And they repeat back everything we're saying, but they're not really getting it. Sure, they can repeat it. They heard it, but they're not grasping it, or they would be doing something different with their behavior. So that's Jesus' plea here. He's like, listen, everybody, and get this. Listen and get this. Understand this. What goes into someone's mouth does not defile them. This is important because, they had a whole bunch of dietary laws. Even dietary laws in the Old Testament that were direct out commands. And so that was part of an old covenant. And Jesus is starting something new. He is fulfilling the old covenant, establishing a new covenant. Things are changing. He's trying to pave the way. He's trying to help them figure this out. He's using logic. Don't you hate it when people use logic against you? He's using logic. He says, what goes into a person's mouth does not defile them. But what comes out of their mouth, that is what defiles them. What, vomit? No, you know what I mean. Okay, what comes out is what defiles them. Then the disciples came to him and asked, do you know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard this? Doesn't this sound just like an American concern? Doesn't this sound just like something we would have a problem with? You've offended somebody. They're offended. Check this out. So Jesus replies, well, every plant that my heavenly Father has not planted will be pulled up by the roots. Leave them. They're blind guides. Ooh, them fighting words. If the blind lead the blind, they're both going to fall into a pit. So here's the situation. So Jesus is like trying to tell them, hey, here's the situation. You need to be pure inside, not just on this outward behavioral thing. You got to be pure inside. Okay, you got to have it all figured out together. And they're like, Jesus, you just offended the Pharisees. And he's like, good. Good. That means that they understood something. That means they were paying attention to have been offended. But since when have we become so afraid of offending people? And I know we don't want to be jerks. You don't want to be jerks. We don't want to go offending people on purpose. At the same time, if something is offensive, doesn't mean we stay away from it if it's absolutely 100% true and you got to say it. If somebody's drowning and you're trying to tell them, hey, you're drowning, they're like, you're offending me. I'm an excellent swimmer. But you're drowning. Shut up. You're offending me. What do you do? Well, don't tell him he's drowning. He's going, his head just went under the water. I'll leave him. I guess. What do? You got to tell them. You got to throw him a life ring or a boat or something. Oh, don't you give that to me. I got it. Don't you offend me. I like to give the world a paradox. What if I were to say I'm offended by offended people? What happens then? Do we have to stop having offended people? Yeah, but it's just weird because here's the reality. We human beings always worship something. That's who we are. If we don't worship God, we're going to worship something else. We're going to worship fame. We're going to worship status. We're going to worship success. We're going to worship people. We're going to worship having a relationship. We're going to worship having a certain car. We're going to worship having the awesomest score on Pac-Man or whatever the case is. It's an old arcade game for the younger people. Okay, so it's just, we worship something. And the people that say, I'm offended, and everyone says, well, you can't say that anymore because someone got offended, then we worship being offended. We always worship something. That's who we are as humans. The question is not, do we worship? The question is the question is not if, but who or what do you worship? Because we all absolutely worship something. And so the disciples were at this point kind of worshiping the fear of ticking off the Pharisees over worshiping the fear of ticking off God. And that's the way it is for a lot of people. They're afraid of people more than they are of God. And they're more concerned with what people think than they do what God thinks. And their fear is misplaced. But that's where that struggle comes. And so here's the disciples with that very much struggle. I'm afraid of what they're going to think, of what they're going to say, of what they're going to do. Jesus, you got to cool your lips. Think about it. Imagine trying to go up to God and telling him to close his mouth because he might offend somebody. That's a gutsy statement. But that's what they're doing. God, shut your yap. Someone doesn't like what you're saying. So this is where we're at in this really bizarre situation. And so there, Peter ticks Jesus off. And it's ironic because Peter's like, Jesus, you're going to offend the Pharisees. And Jesus goes, great, you just offended me. Check it out. I'm not kidding. That's what Jesus says in different words. Peter says, could you explain this all to us? What's going on here? You're defending them. You give us a parable. We don't understand. Can you explain it? And then Jesus says, are you an idiot? You say, Jesus never calls somebody an idiot. Are you still so stupid? Okay, dull, but still, you get the idea. That's what he's saying. He's like, are you kidding me? I have taught you how to interpret parables time and time again. Why can't you get it through your thick skull? I know you've said that to your parents, or they've said it to you. How many? If I've told you once, I've told you 1,000 times. That's where Jesus is at. Man, if I've taught you once, and I've taught you twice, are you kidding me? Are you still so dull? Because even the Pharisees figured it out because they were offended. So if they can figure it out, why can't the people? So he's so frustrated. Why are you so dull? Jesus asked him. Don't you see that whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach and then out of the body? And Jesus is talking about number 2. Isn't that awesome? I bet you woke up this morning thinking to yourself, oh, what a morning. I hope the pastor talks about duty. Well, we are. Here it is. Okay, Jesus said, whatever comes in the mouth leaves. That's what it's going to do. Okay, and so he's like, what happened? Goes into the mouth, goes into the stomach, and then out of the body. But the things that come out of a person's mouth come from the heart. Okay, what you say reveals a lot of who you are. Okay, so what comes out of the mouth comes from the heart, and these defile them. These defile them. For out of the heart comes evil thoughts, evil issues like murder and adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. These are what defile a person. Because if your heart is raging with unforgiveness, bitterness, and anger, then you're hating someone. You can't stand them. You wish they were dead. Even if you don't actually kill them, you've committed murder in the heart. And God says you're guilty because you don't look at part of God's creation that way. No matter what they've done, you don't hate on them like that. Adultery, you don't go lusting after people. Sexual immorality, all these things that you want it, and then you go for it. Okay, so it starts in the heart as you worship whatever it is that you're worshiping. And then these behaviors and these thoughts that lead to behaviors, those are the actions of your worship. Okay, these are the actions of worship. So these are what defile a person. But eating with unwashed hands? Yeah, no. That defiles nothing. All these things will defile a person, but eating with unwashed hands? Yeah, no. That defiles absolutely nothing. That is far from the issue here. And so Jesus lifts off 7 sins. And it's really fascinating he lifts off 7 sins. And I would love to be able to take a good 3 hours and just go through all 7 of them. But I decided, we don't really have that type of time. I mean, technically I could do it. I mean, what would you do? Just get up and leave at some point, or just sit and say, man, my butt, whatever the case is. And then you look for a new pastor. but I'm going to be appropriate and to be respectful of your time. And I'm only going to pick out, I had to ask myself, how many of 7 is worth talking about? So of the 7 sins, I decided, do I do 6? Do I do 5? I'm just going to do 1. Doesn't that sound like fun? I'm just going to pick 1. I'd rather do 1 well than to do 5 halfway. Does that sound all right with you guys? I mean, I got the notes for either one. I could just flip this over and do something. I got them all here. I got all 7. I get to pick which one I want to do. You notice on your fill in the blank sheet, it doesn't have any notes after this because I get to pick. So I actually thought about having like a little auction. Who wants to auction off, adultery? Who wants to offer adultery? How about murder? Anybody have murder? Oh, we got 1 over here, 1 over here, 1 murder over there, 1 murder over here, 1 murder over there. We got 2 murders over here. We got 3 murders over there. Because we can see how far we're willing to go. But you know what? Here's what we're going to do. And I've been thinking long and hard on this all week, trying to figure out which one would be the good one to hit. And I really want to hit the issue regarding sexual immorality because that is something that isn't often talked about in churches because people say that doesn't belong behind the pulpit. You might offend people if you talk about sex. So guess what? We're going to talk about it. And you may be like, oh, but sex, you can't say that from the pulpit. And I'll be like, I just did sex. In fact, what's hilarious is some people were sleeping until I said the word. Now they're awake. Like, did he just say sex? He didn't say sex, did he? And some people are like, "Ooh, where's he?" And even other people are like, "Where's he going with this? This could get really ugly." Okay, but this is going on YouTube. It'll be fun. So anyway, so here's what we're going to talk about specifically, not the sexual activity. We'll save that for a different sermon. Because Jesus didn't talk about sexual activity as far as what is healthy. He talked about sexual immorality. And sexual immorality has various ways of being able to be handled. Okay, and so because it's a junk drawer term. Anybody have junk drawers in your home? You know what I'm talking about? It's that drawer in your kitchen that has no rhyme or reason to it. You open this drawer. You open this drawer and there's spoons and forks. You open this drawer and there's measuring cups and spatulas. You open this drawer and you'll find paper clips, a battery, some string, a key that you have no idea what it goes to. You just got your junk drawer. Okay, so sexual immorality is a junk drawer term. It is a term that includes all of sexual sin that is possible to man. Okay, it is just absolutely everything. And I don't want to cover every single form of sexual morality because, again, we'd be here for a really, really long time. And so I'd like to hit on something. I looked over all the rest of Matthew and where we're going after Matthew is over, because it looks like we might be going to the book of Jude real quick, because it's only 1 chapter and really short. Some people are like, Matthew's really long. Well, Jude's really short. Okay, it's so small you can skip it, and then you have to yell out, hey, Jude. Okay, and so I looked at what is covered in the rest of Matthew and in Jude regarding sexual sin, and I want to hit the issue that is not covered in all of those, and that is the issue of sexuality within the dating relationship. Okay, because that's not covered in the rest of Matthew, and it's not covered in the book of Jude. Homosexuality is, adultery is, and so many things, having affairs is, so many things are going to be covered, but the issue of dating, not so much. So I think it'd be good to try to hammer in on that issue, because again, it sounds like this hasn't really been covered in a lot of churches these days. I know, I did a web search, and a lot of the YouTube videos that were there were uploaded from a sermon done in the 80s. You could tell because it had the VHS wrinkle in it and a little bar at the bottom of tracking, and it just isn't really covered in a lot of time. So I'd like to try to hammer this out. Okay, and so one day we'll cover some of the other issues, but for today I'd like this one, and that is because I have a lot of people ask me a common question. This comes from high schoolers, it comes from middle schoolers, and it even comes from college students. And the question usually starts with something like this. It says, hey, Pastor John, how far can we go in our dating relationship until it's too far? And then they use metaphors like baseball, which I always find fascinating coming from Indiana, because I figured they'd come up with a football analogy. Or basketball, but it's still always baseball. Exactly what base is inappropriate in the dating relationship? Is it, and people are like, oh yeah, I see them. Is it first base, second base, third base? What is it that's too far in a dating relationship? And so where do we draw that line? And so to which I'd like to speak directly to that question and say that the question is 100% misleading for several reasons. Reason number one, the whole purpose of the question is to ask, how close to sin can I possibly get until it becomes sin? And rather we should be asking, how close to Jesus can I possibly get? Okay, so the whole question means your relationship's off kilter. Because then your whole goal is, how close to sin can we get? When really the purpose of the relationship is, how close to Jesus can we get? Okay, so if you're already asking that question, you're kind of focusing on the wrong part. And then secondly, I'd like to offer this. You're not even at the base to bat. Why are you talking about first and second base? That's a married game. You're not even, you're in the dugout. You're not even a player. You're a water boy at best. So why are you so concerned about trying to get the first or trying to get the second when you don't even have a bat in your hand yet? Okay, you're not even there yet, so don't be so concerned about that. Focus on trying to be together and getting closer to Jesus. Focus there, not the other way around. Okay, that's where the focus needs to be. If your relationship is not drawing you closer to Jesus, if he or she is not drawing you closer, and if you're not drawing them closer, you're wasting your time. Just being honest with you. You might be like, well, that offends me. Well, it's still a waste of time. You should be offended at wasting your time, because isn't that valuable? Would you like the idea of dating someone for 5 years just to have it fall apart and wish you could have your 5 years back? When someone could have told you up front, don't waste your time. Well, it's already been 2 years. Well, count 2 years lost. 3 years to gain, rather than 3 years later say I lost 5. Okay, so you don't waste it. You're young. You're trying to figure it out now. Don't waste it. And then looking at Scripture, there's a whole bunch of verses here for you about this, in case you're wondering if I'm just talking philosophy. Check this out, Ephesians 5:3, but among you there must not even be a hint of sexual immorality, or of any kind of impurity, or of greed, because these are improper for God's holy people. You can go into 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 1, where Paul says that it is not right for man to touch any woman in a sexual way until she's his wife. Okay, so that just requires any touching of anything sexual whatsoever. You can go into 1 Timothy chapter 5, verses 1 and 2, where it encourages young men to treat young women as if they were their sister. And you don't go feeling up your sister. Okay, that's not cool. And so on and on, the Scripture does talk to the issue of premarital sex and premarital intimacies, that it belongs in the marriage relationship. That's where it is. But yet our society wants to embrace and worship how we feel. Our society wants to worship sex. That's why you find it all over the place on advertisements. As if when you buy a car, there's really a skinny blonde in a bikini that comes with it. Okay, you look at the magazine. I'm at Meijer looking at the magazines, and it seems like all the magazines for women tell women how to look hot naked. And then all the magazines for men tends to be what it looks like to have a woman that's hot and naked. That just seems to be what it's all about, is this worshiping of sexuality. And then our society has these weird little phrases to try to crowbar you from the truth. Stuff like, well, how do we know we're sexually incompatible? How do we know if we're sexually compatible? So we got to try it out. And my wife is saying, careful. She censors my sermons, by the way. I show stuff to her, and she goes, yeah, can't say that, can't say that, can't say that. Say this, but in a different way. Okay, let me just say this. If there's a man and a woman, you're sexually compatible physically. Okay, it's nuts and bolts, people. So there's no such thing as having to wonder, are we compatible? And here's the other part of that question that's really a problem. Women are not a used car. You don't go test driving them to find out what they're like. Okay, so women, you are better than a used car. You are better than a new car. Any man that wants to treat you like a car, well, I got to figure out how she handles. I got to figure out what she's like when we get to 60 or 70 on the highway with the top down. If any guy is trying to see the metaphors there, huh? Trying to be nice, right? I'm getting them. Just got to make sure they get it. Not just hearing, but understanding. Okay, and so any guy that tries to say, hey, we got to see if we're compatible, we got to just try it on and see. If he wants to take you out for a test spin, it's not a guy to hang out with. He doesn't respect you enough. Plain and simple. Because sexuality is supposed to be an expression of love. An act of unity that reflects the Holy Spirit and reflects God the Father and reflects Jesus. You say, what? Yeah, sexuality. Ever ask your question, why did God create sex in the first place? I mean, of all the things God could have done, for crying out loud. Think about it. It's messy and weird. Okay, of all the things God could have created, why did he create sex? I mean, he could have made it that we could have just, like Cabbage Patch dolls, right? We just put a little feet in the ground and pour water and up comes the baby. Couldn't that have happened? Couldn't God have done that? You might say, but that's not possible. Well, if God made it possible, it would be. Right? You just go over to the baby fields. Right? You just kind of look at all the little heads popping out of the ground. I think I want that one. That one's so cute. You pluck that one. He could have done it. He chose the way he did on purpose because the description the Bible gives for sexuality is the two shall become one. And God is 3 in 1. What that means is that it is multiple, it is a diversity of uniqueness coming together to become one. So sexuality is to reflect the Trinity. That's why he made it, because we're made in his image. And sexuality is the way that we get to have the most unity a human can ever have. You can't find unity or harmony in more pure way than that. It doesn't exist. And so we get to reflect the Trinity. Now, I tell premarital couple that I use in premarital counseling, hey, sexuality reflects the Trinity, but don't say that on your wedding night. It kills the mood. Hey, we're reflecting God right now. Yeah, I'm done. Just being honest, it does. It begins to kill the mood. Okay, and so that's why God is so concerned about sexual immorality. Not only is it about selfishness if it's outside of God's plans, not only is it about selfishness, not only is it about taking advantage of the other person, it is also disrupting and impurifying and polluting and corrupting the image of God himself. Because we're supposed to reflect him. That's why he cares so much. And so all his rules and commands are not meant to be a bummer. They're there for our benefit. They're there to help us live the best, happiest possible life we can. Because he knows. He knows what's best. You might say, but it seems like so restrictive. Well, let me tell you a great analogy of this. The other day, I was taking my daughter on a daddy-daughter date. Okay, my wife takes our son out on mama-son dates, and I take my daughter out on daddy-daughter dates from time to time, and I take her out on a daddy-daughter date, and sometimes I take her out to get a bite to eat, I take her to a movie, I take her to a store, and we play the claw game. She loves playing the stupid claw game. And it's because we win every time. It's awesome. I love the claw game. It's so much fun. But when we're there at the store, sometimes she'll say, oh, Daddy, can we go to this restaurant? Or can we go to this store? Can we buy this? Can we buy that? Can we buy this? And I'll tell her, no, you're not going to get that. She goes, why? This is daddy-daughter date, and that's what I want. And I'm like, nope, got something better. She goes, but I want that right there. Nope, something else. We're going to do something different. And then we start going. She goes, oh, let's go to that one. Let's go to that one. Nope, not that one either. And then we go into the mall, let's say, and then she'll see those stupid little things in the middle, those little kiosk thingies, and they got those little splat balls. Ever seen those stupid little things? You just kind of go, and they go, and then they kind of fold back up, And it looks so cool until you take it home and they break. What's up with that? You can throw them 1,000 times in the mall and they never break. Take them home, and it's just, yeah. But nonetheless, my daughter looks, she goes, I want one of those. I'm like, nope, got something better for you. And eventually we go, and this one time, she wanted a splat ball so bad. I'm like, nope, we're not getting a splat ball. And she's like, why? Why? I just want a splat. And I'm literally dragging her, and she's starting to cry. And I'm like, man, this is going to be like the worst daddy-daughter date ever. when your date cries, and it's not because of the movie, there's something really misfiring here, okay? I'm like, no, come on. She's like, but, and she's doing the drag, but, and then I'm like, come on, this is daddy-daughter date. I got you covered. Don't worry. She just she's trying to act big, and she's just kind of holding on to my hand as we go, and then we walked into Build-A-Bear. And she went, oh, are we going in there? I said, yes. She went, I said, unless you'd rather go get a splat ball. She went, no, Build-A-Bear's fine. Build-A-Bear's fine. Now, that's what God's laws are like. No, don't go for this. Don't go for the cheap quick. Don't go for the simple. Don't go for the low fruit on the tree like that. I got these laws and you don't understand it because you just got to wait and see the Build-A-Bear that's coming. So that's how God's laws are. They're for your benefit. They might seem restrictive and like all it is no, not this, not this. It's because something better is on the horizon. And sometimes you just can't wrap your mind around how it's better. Even if he tells you what it is, you still just can't wrap your mind around everything. It's like telling a tadpole what it's like to be a frog. They're just not going to get it. Dude, you're going to have legs. Really? You're going to be out there in the air. What's air like? Well, it's like water, but without water. Huh? Tadpole's not going to get it, what it's like to be a frog until they sprout their legs and bounce. You gotta wait. And any tadpole that wants to do it early, what happens to them? They die. You can't do it out of order like that. Okay, so that's God's laws. And some of us, we gotta deal with that. Because we all worship something or someone. And the question is, whom or what do we worship? Because some of us here, we worship like the building. Some of us, we worship. And we start changing things. And then people are like, oh, how could you change that? Well, why not? But that's not the way we do it. What if I were to say, hey, let's change service times where we do Sunday school first and then church service? People are like, why would we do that? Well, why not do it? Well, we've done it this way forever. And? What if I were to say, hey, let's paint the brick so it doesn't look so red because society doesn't like red brick buildings as much anymore. They view contemporary churches as being like white or gray or something. Let's paint the building. People are like, what? Get rid of our red brick building. Let's get rid of the pews and put in chairs. Why would we do? We're not going to do that. Why not? Why, you worship the pews? Does it really change how we worship God? Does that really change who God is? But see, we worship things. We just don't know we worship them until change hits. So what do you worship? Like really worship? You might say God, but how many times have you been frustrated by changes in the church? How many times have you been frustrated by something being rearranged or even an idea of what might come and what change might take place? How do you handle that? How much complaining do you do? Or do you say, hey, you know what? If that change means that more people will come to Christ, then do it and do it even more. Why are you holding back? But are we really concerned about people accepting Christ? Or are we really concerned about what makes us comfortable in this building? So see, our issues is more than just, let's mock the young people and their immorality. Our issues are sometimes very much, do we worship? We might actually be more impure than we ever imagined. Let's have a word of prayer.